Did Rick and Morty really escape from the fear hole? In fact, they've always been in the hole. All the adventures were just an illusion. In the last episode of the 7th season of Rick and Morty went to the fear hole in pursuit of excitement. Subsequently, they experienced multiple loops inside the hole, like an infinite matryoshka. Whenever they became aware of their fears, they would immediately return to the inside of the hole. They even stayed inside for a rather long time once. At the end of the episode, it was said that Rick didn't enter at all. So why was Morty's fear related to Rick getting his wife Diane back? Was it just because he was afraid of Rick leaving? Moreover, Morty experienced the events with evil Morty alongside Rick. He also learned that in this finite multiverse, all Ricks had lost Diane. To get Diane back, one could only look beyond the finite multiverse. And the portal that could break through the finite multiverse couldn't be green. From this, it can be associated that the fear hole might be able to modify memories. Then it directly overturned the entire series. All the tragedies in Rick and Morty might actually be fake. They've been in the hole from the very beginning. It's unknown how they got in exactly, but all the tragedies would then have an explanation. Why did Rick lose Diane? Why did Rick choose the current Morty, who seems rather ordinary? Perhaps Rick and Morty are just an ordinary grandfather-grandson pair, and all the adventures they experienced were just illusions fabricated by the fear hole to absorb their fears. There might not be these strange places in the universe at all. In the world of Rick and Morty, not all family members are from the same universe. In fact, Rick had an ulterior motive when he first came into contact with the new family. First of all, the protagonist Rick is not the Rick from the C-137 universe. The Rick who killed his family is the real C-137 Rick, and the original grandpa of the protagonist Morty was the C-137 Rick. This was revealed by Rick himself in the first episode of the 6th season. The protagonist Rick initially chose to be in the C-137 universe just because he was chasing his enemy there. In the 6th episode of the 1st season, due to the actions of Morty and Rick, the Earth in the C-137 universe became a world full of Cronenberg monsters. So they chose a new universe where both Rick and Morty had died to live in. This became their main universe from then until the 6th season. And it's also the universe of Beth and Summer and the protagonist's family. The replacement of Morty's father, Jerry, happened in the 2nd episode of the 2nd season. It wasn't a big deal. He was just mixed up in the daycare, and they brought back a Jerry from another universe. Actually, there doesn't seem to be much of a difference. Then, in the 1st episode of the 6th season, the Earth in the main universe was destroyed because of Jerry's strange actions. Rick took his family to find a new universe to live in. Coincidentally, the whole family in this universe had died and buried themselves in the backyard. In this episode, the fate of Morty's original father was also mentioned. He encountered the original C-137 Rick, who escaped from the protagonist Rick's pursuit. So far, except for Rick and Morty, the whole family in the Cronenberg universe is dead. It's a bit of a pity, as this was probably the strongest Jerry so far. In the Rick and Morty worldview, the concept of space has been thoroughly explored, and parallel universes can be traveled through casually. However, inventions or concepts related to time are very rare. Maybe the creative team was afraid that it would be difficult to explain later. So has Rick and Morty ever had any inventions related to time? If time manipulation were possible, it would be very easy to save Rick's wife, Diane. So is it that Rick can't do it, or he just didn't want to? The answer is that he can't. Rick has had several inventions that are close to the concept of time. In the 1st episode of the 2nd season, Rick even paused time with a time crystal. And because he paused it for too long, the timeline split. But this is different from parallel universes. It's certain that such a timeline split can't affect the main timeline. Most likely, it just creates small parallel universes. So this invention can only pause time. In the 8th episode of the 4th season, Rick also made a save file machine for Morty. This machine seems to be able to send the user back to the saved time point, having the ability to rewind time. However, in fact, this invention just intercepts an almost identical parallel universe and graphs it when restoring the save. So although it seems related to time, it's actually just another use of parallel universes. And every time it's reloaded, it consumes one Morty. The last one is in the 10th episode of the 5th season. Morty drank an age-increasing potion. Rick took Morty to Rick's citadel and used a machine to extract Morty's extra age. But the machine itself seems to be more related to genes and has little to do with time. So it can be concluded that Rick really can't manipulate time. In the finite multiverse of Rick and Morty, the Rick who is the Rickest chose an ordinary Morty in the end. Is there a plan behind Rick's decision, or is there something else going on? To know how powerful Morty can be, just look at evil Morty. Evil Morty easily took control of Rick's citadel, killed all the Ricks in the citadel, and escaped from the finite multiverse. But the main character Rick still chose the main character, Morty. In fact, looking through the plot from the first season to the seventh season, the answer has already been given. In the seventh season, Evil Morty mentioned that the original Morty of the main character Rick had died. Even before the current Morty, he had had many previous Mortys. The current Morty is just another random substitute he chose. However, during their adventures together, the main character, Morty, showed his unique characteristics. This successfully attracted Rick. Moreover, he also brought changes to Rick, gradually transforming Rick from the almost inhumane and trigger, happy scientific madman in the first season into the current grandfather of Morty. In the seventh season, Rick could even fully respect Morty's ideas and help him deal with the consequences of those ideas. For example, in the episode of Spaghetti Night, Rick didn't stop any of Morty's decisions. He just helped solve the consequences at the end. In the previous seasons, he would probably have just left. This is something other Mortys couldn't do. And the most important point is that, although the main character Morty might not be as powerful as Evil Morty, he is definitely not weak. In the episode when Rick's citadel was destroyed, without Rick, Morty still managed to solve the dilemma on his own. In conclusion, perhaps the current Rick and Morty are the best combination.
Maybe I don't connect because I'm the rickest Rick there is. And it would go without saying that the rickest Rick would have the Mortiest Morty. It would go without saying, huh? Yeah, it would.
Do you know how powerful Morty's combat power is? Morty in Rick and Morty can be said to be a real lower body warrior. Most of the plots where he shows his combat power are either forced out or for the sake of picking up girls. But he also had a performance that was closest to that of Evil Morty, and that time it was for his family. First, there are some plots where Morty fights because of women. In the 9th episode of the second season, Morty lost the spaceship while trying to save a beauty. In order to end the battle as soon as possible and get the spaceship back, Rick directly put a suit of iron armor on Morty. At first, Morty didn't want to fight, but finally, under the oppression of the villagers, he erupted. It only took him a short while to kill everyone present. Then, in the first episode of the 5th season, which is also Morty's coolest episode. In this episode, Morty wanted to get a bottle of wine that Rick put in a small world in order to have a drink with the goddess Jessica. But the Aborigines in the small world resisted strongly. In order to quickly resolve the battle, Morty picked up his equipment and rushed in. There was no more hesitation. He solved the battle in 3 to 5 seconds, got the wine, and left. After that, in the 3rd episode of the 5th season, Morty, who had already lost Jessica, fell in love with the environmental goddess Tina. During the pursuit, he learned that the goddess's safety was threatened. So this time, Morty didn't rely on any of Rick's equipment. He killed all those people on his own. His combat methods were quite mature, and the time for his family. Although Morty, who had changed universes, once told his sister Summer that she didn't need to care too much about family affection, and he had even been buried in the backyard. But when he really saw his sister being hurt by a scumbag, Morty couldn't stand by. This time can be said to be Morty's most manly moment.
Sit down! You made my sister cry, Ethan. You messed with her body image. Look, Morty. Shh. Careful, Ethan. Your s'more is burning.
There is a detail that many people haven't noticed. Rick and Morty. When Rick's memories were being extracted, why did a childhood Morty appear? And why was there a photo of Rick holding a young Morty hanging in Rick's friend Birdperson's house? To avoid confusing the characters, I will use code names as substitutes from now on. First, there's our main character, Rick, whom we'll call Rick 1. After his wife and daughter were blown up, he started chasing the murderer everywhere and went to Universe 3. After that, he met Birdperson and they fought against the Galactic Federation together until he had a disagreement with Birdperson after the last battle and left alone. All the experiences before this were the same for Rick 1 and Rick 2. But Rick 2 went to Universe 4 and then their paths diverged. Rick 2 chose to return to his home in Universe 4 to accompany his daughter. In this way, he accompanied young Morty and then sent the photo to Birdperson. After continuing his pursuit and establishing the citadel of Ricks, Rick 1 also chose to go to his home in Universe 3 and met 4-year-old Morty. He accompanied him for 10 years until the Earth was destroyed. Rick 1 took Morty to Universe 4, and at this time Rick 2 was blown up. Thus, a complete loop was formed. Even the Birdperson who fought against the Galactic Federation with Rick 1 was not the same as the Birdperson in the subsequent plot. In this way, the loop was completed and everything was explained. We all know that Evil Morty escaped from the central finite curve, but what exactly happened from the very beginning of the story? And how did he achieve his goal step by step? The real beginning that prompted Evil Morty to abandon Rick and break out of this paradise demarcated by Rick originated after another adventure. As he said during his presidential campaign later, Evil Morty had had many Ricks. After being disappointed in this Rick, Morty was completely disappointed in all Ricks. So after Rick got drunk, he modified him. Subsequently, Evil Morty deleted his files in Rick's citadel. To avoid being tracked by the Citadel, he kidnapped a large number of Mortys and Ricks. The Mortys were all made into isolation shields, and the memories of the Ricks were extracted. In this way, he gradually learned the truth about the establishment of the Citadel. He knew that it was the main character, Rick, who created the central finite curve. Inside this boundary was a paradise for Ricks. He also learned about the darkness in Morty trading. In order to escape from the central finite curve, evil Morty hacked into the main character Rick's portal gun and attracted the main character Rick to look for him and extracted his memories. However, this extraction was incomplete, so evil Morty continued to hide in the Citadel. By chance, he saw a newspaper about the presidential election. In order to achieve his plan, he started to run for president. At the same time, he used means to eliminate all his competitors and even killed the disobedient counselors. Thus, all the preliminary preparations were completed. When the main character Rick came to the Citadel again, this time the memories were complete. So evil Morty killed everyone in the Citadel and used their flesh and blood as energy. Finally, he successfully escaped from the central finite curve and truly set foot in the infinite world.